wildly popular auction show Storage Wars is under fire from an ex-star who says they are faking some of the big money shots, and ABC's Dan Harris separates fact from fiction.
Storage Wars pulled a quiet, local business, storage auctions, and dropped it into the glare of national television, where every bid became performance, every locker a gamble with consequences, and every personality a public identity under constant scrutiny. What had once been a small, semi-private ecosystem of professional buyers and resale dealers quickly transformed into a pressure cooker of fame, money, and exposure. Today, we'll look at the stories of Storage Wars stars who are dead or in jail in 2026, and some narrow escapes as well. No beating around the bush. Let's dive straight into it. Mark Balelo. In February 2013, the world of Storage Wars tightened into something smaller, darker, and more unpredictable when Mark Balelo's name shifted from auction listings to police blotters and emergency calls. At 40 years old, Balelo was already a recognizable force in the Southern California storage auction circuit. Known on-screen as the flamboyant Rico Suave, he operated Balelo Incorporated out of Simi Valley, California, moving through auctions with a fast, aggressive bidding style and carrying tens of thousands of dollars in cash as if it were routine inventory rather than risk. His rise was built through years in liquidation, car sales, and resale businesses before reality TV ever spotlighted him. The turning point came on Saturday, February 9, 2013. Ventura County authorities arrested him in connection with possession of controlled substances and being under the influence as well. He was released, but things only got more twisted from here on. He was scheduled to appear in court just days later, on February 19th. But on Monday morning, February 11th, 2013, employees at his Simi Valley auction house discovered him inside a car parked in the garage. The engine was running. The garage door was closed. Emergency responders arrived, but it was already too late. The Ventura County medical examiner later ruled it a case of self-unaliving through carbon monoxide poisoning. He was 40 years old. Balelo's presence on Storage Wars had always been defined by intensity rather than screen time volume. He was not a background figure. He was the bidder who disrupted the rhythm of auctions, often arriving with more cash than anyone expected and pushing prices into uncomfortable territory for competitors like Hester and Darrell Sheets. Producers framed him as both competitor and wildcard, a man whose confidence could turn a routine locker into a bidding war within seconds. Before television, his business footprint was already broad. He ran multiple ventures, including liquidation sales, auction operations, and resale outlets. He had built a reputation for scale, moving large volumes of merchandise quickly, sometimes buying hundreds of units in a short period, treating storage auctions as an industrial system rather than a side hustle. That scale is part of what made his television persona believable. Yet nothing about that professional identity insulated him from the immediate shock of the arrest in 2013. News reports consistently tied his final days to that legal moment, noting prior substance abuse-related issues in his history and emphasizing how quickly the situation escalated from custody to tragedy. Shocking, no? Well, we're only getting started. Gunter Nezhoda. Gunter never relied on theatrics, yet became instantly recognizable through presence alone. Born in Austria and later based in Las Vegas, he appeared alongside his son Darrell Nezhoda in multiple episodes between roughly 2015 and 2019. By the time he entered the show's orbit, Gunter was already shaped by decades of hands-on work in antiques, photography, and live resale environments. He had worked professionally as a photographer for major companies, including corporate and advertising clients, while also maintaining a deep background in collectible trading and auction culture. However, in September 2022, he was diagnosed with lung cancer after what was initially a private medical struggle within his family. According to statements later shared by Renee, the diagnosis came after a long history of smoking, and by early 2023, the disease had progressed to a critical stage. Doctors identified extensive damage to his lungs, described in reporting as holes in his lungs. a sign of severe complications that limited treatment options and narrowed the path forward to emergency interventions rather than long-term recovery. After a brief attempt at further medical intervention, including travel for emergency care, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Within approximately 6 months of diagnosis, the illness reached its final stage. On March 21, 2023, he died in his sleep from complications tied directly to lung cancer at the age of 67. After his death, Renee continued operating in the same space: resale, auctions, and media-related content tied to bargain hunters' thrift, effectively carrying forward the structure his father had helped shape. The transition was immediate in practical terms, but permanent in emotional weight, as the business remained intact while one of its central figures was no longer part of its daily rhythm. Moving on, Dave Hester. Born in California and already active in the auction and thrift ecosystem long before television, Dave Hester built his reputation through thrift ownership and resale logistics, later becoming instantly recognizable on screen through his catchphrase, "You up," delivered like a signal flare before each bid. From 2010 to 2011, when Storage Wars was reaching peak visibility, Hester had become one of the show's defining personalities. His approach was aggressive and strategic, bidding early, inflating prices intentionally, and creating psychological pressure on other buyers like Darrell Sheets and Weiss. That style made him essential television, but it also created friction behind the scenes, where the line between entertainment pacing and real auction dynamics began to blur under production scrutiny. The turning point arrived in 2012. Hester filed a lawsuit against A&E television networks and the show's production companies, alleging that the series was partially staged. His claims included accusations that valuable items were planted inside storage lockers and that certain outcomes were manipulated to enhance drama for viewers. Legal filings in the Los Angeles Superior Court initiated a prolonged dispute that unfolded across years rather than weeks. Some elements of the case were dismissed, while others moved toward settlement discussions that ultimately resolved without a public, definitive win for either side. The absence of a clear legal victory kept the narrative unresolved, allowing both the network's denials and Hester's allegations to persist in parallel interpretations of what the show represented. During this period, his role on the show shifted. He was temporarily removed from Storage Wars following the escalation of the dispute. His absence was noticeable in the auction ecosystem of the series, with fewer confrontational bids, a different pacing in competitive sequences, and a recalibration of the show's internal dynamics. Eventually, he returned to the series, resuming his role in later seasons, though the energy surrounding his presence had permanently changed. What remained consistent across the timeline was his lack of criminal conviction or imprisonment. Despite heavy online speculation that often circulates around reality television personalities involved in disputes, there is no verified record of incarceration tied to Dave Hester in connection with the lawsuit or any other case. His conflicts remained in civil court, not criminal proceedings, and the legal system treated the matter strictly as a contractual and production dispute rather than a criminal allegation. In the years following the show's peak popularity, Hester transitioned back into smaller-scale auction and resale activity. While the you-up persona remained widely recognized in pop culture references, his day-to-day activity returned to the mechanics of buying, flipping, and auction participation at a reduced scale. This next one will shock you. Weiss. Long before Storage Wars, Weiss built his wealth in the produce business, co-owning a successful distribution company with his brother, which allowed him to step into storage auctions as a form of entertainment rather than necessity. On the show, he would arrive without urgency, often late to bids, and frequently in spectacular vehicles, custom hot rods, vintage Cadillacs, and high-end motorcycles. That collection was not incidental. Over decades, Weiss assembled one of the more recognizable private vehicle collections associated with any reality TV personality of the era, with motorcycles alone numbering in the dozens and including rare models and heavily customized builds. The show framed him as the collector, a label that matched both his personality and his behavior at auctions. Unlike aggressive bidders such as Dave Hester or calculated operators like Darrell Sheets, Weiss treated storage units as a form of unpredictable treasure hunting. He often bid based on instinct rather than a systematic resale strategy. This made him unpredictable in competitive bidding environments, but highly entertaining for viewers. His segments became some of the most replayed moments of early Storage Wars seasons, largely because he treated the process as exploration rather than transaction. That trajectory changed abruptly in March 2019. On April 24, 2019, Weiss was involved in a serious motorcycle crash in California. He was riding in a group when a vehicle turned into his path in a parking area exit scenario, causing a high-impact collision. Reports from the time describe multiple traumatic injuries: fractures to his femur and pelvis, broken ribs, and significant internal trauma, along with head and chest injuries severe enough to require immediate emergency intervention. He was transported to a hospital in critical condition and placed under intensive care. The medical response that followed extended over months. Weiss underwent surgeries and a prolonged rehabilitation process that included physical therapy for mobility restoration and treatment for internal injuries. Recovery timelines for injuries of that scale typically span months to years, and in his case, public appearances did not resume for a significant period following the accident. Despite the intensity of the incident, Weiss survived and eventually re-emerged in public life. By 2020 and beyond, he began appearing in social media posts and limited public engagements, showing gradual recovery and continued involvement in personal projects. While he did not return as a full-time regular on Storage Wars, he did participate in occasional appearances connected to the franchise's extended media presence, signaling that his connection to the show was still intact even after the accident. A narrow escape indeed. Moving on, Darrell Sheets. Known on-screen as The Gambler, Darrell Sheets built his identity around high-risk bidding, often committing thousands of dollars to storage units on instinct rather than certainty. He would routinely outbid competitors like Dave Hester and Barry Weiss, then reveal massive hauls that justified the risk, turning volatility into a signature method. Before television exposure, Sheets had already spent years in the Southern California storage auction circuit, operating as a reseller and thrift operator. When Storage Wars began airing in 2010, his combination of experience and risk tolerance made him one of the show's central figures. His son, Brandon Sheets, frequently appeared alongside him in earlier seasons, creating a father-son dynamic that grounded the otherwise chaotic bidding environment. Their partnership became part of the show's structure until Brandon's gradual exit from the series in later seasons, after which Darrell continued solo appearances. The first major disruption in Sheets's public timeline came in 2018. During that year, he suffered a heart attack. The incident marked a clear turning point in his on-screen and off-screen activity. While he survived, the health scare introduced a noticeable reduction in his participation intensity. In the years that followed, his auction activity became more selective, with fewer appearances and a visible shift away from the high-frequency bidding style that had defined his earlier television persona. Even after the heart attack, Sheets did not fully withdraw from the industry. He continued limited involvement in storage auctions and resale work, maintaining connections within the same ecosystem that had defined his career for decades. However, the scale of participation changed. Instead of being a constant presence at televised auctions, he transitioned into a more intermittent role, appearing occasionally in related media or local auction environments rather than the structured intensity of reality television filming cycles. His later years became a mix of reduced public visibility and continued association with the storage auction world. While some cast members diversified into retail brands or media spin-offs, Sheets remained closer to the original trade environment, operating within the same type of auctions that had shaped his early career. But then, everything fell apart. Officers from Lake Havasu City, Arizona, were called to the Sheets residence at around 2 a.m. local time on April 22, 2026, where they discovered what was later confirmed to be his body. In a statement cited by multiple outlets, including Variety, police said Sheets suffered from what appeared to be a self-inflicted injury. and confirmed that his family had been notified as the investigation remains active. Tributes from fellow cast members, including Darrell Nezhoda, described him as a hard-working figure who deeply valued family. But that was not all. According to coverage citing co-stars and law enforcement commentary, Sheets had been dealing with prolonged cyberbullying that allegedly escalated over several years, with some associates claiming it intensified in the period leading up to his passing away. Lake Havasu City Police indicated that the case remained under active investigation and publicly acknowledged that cyberbullying allegations were being reviewed as part of the broader inquiry, while the official medical determination cited a self-inflicted gunshot wound discovered after officers responded to a welfare call at a residence in Arizona. Co-stars such as Laura Dotson described him in interviews as increasingly distressed and terrified, while Darrell Sheets suggested that targeted online harassment may have played a role, urging investigators to identify individuals involved in the alleged abuse. Within the same reporting cycle, entertainment outlets also noted claims that Sheets' behavior in his final weeks appeared unusually subdued in financial dealings, interpreted by some acquaintances as potential personal closure behavior, though these interpretations remained unconfirmed by authorities. Moving on, Jarrod Sheets. Jarrod Sheets entered the story of Storage Wars during its mid-run evolution, when the show was shifting from novelty bidding battles into character-driven reality television. Introduced as part of a duo with Brandi Pasante, he was initially framed through contrast: Brandi's calculated caution versus Jarrod's impulsive, high-energy bidding style. Together, they operate a resale business in Orange County, California, and their store, Now and Then second-hand store, became an extension of their on-screen identity. Across early seasons, Jarrod stretched budgets, misjudged locker value, and occasionally landed unexpected wins that justified his risk-taking. This unpredictability became a narrative tool for producers, especially when paired with Brandi's grounded approach, which often stabilizes their joint financial decisions. Their dynamic evolved into one of the show's central relationship storylines, with business pressure and personal conflict increasingly overlapping as seasons progress. By the time the series reached its later seasons, the relationship between Jarrod Sheets and Brandi Pasante began to fracture off-camera. Reports and later confirmations indicate that the couple separated around the late 2010s, with their romantic and business partnership gradually dissolving. But it only got more complicated from here on. Between 2019 and 2021, Sheets was involved in a misdemeanor domestic violence-related incident involving Brandi Pasante. Details reported in court and media coverage indicate that the incident did not result in extended incarceration, but it did lead to legal scrutiny and misdemeanor-level proceedings. Following this period, both individuals effectively moved away from their joint television storyline. Brandi Pasante continued to appear in media and business contexts independently, while Jarrod Sheets' association with the franchise diminished significantly. Outside of the show, Sheets maintains a lower but persistent public profile. Public scrutiny around Jarrod Sheets persists intermittently, largely due to the overlap between personal relationships and televised exposure. Because his early popularity was tied directly to a long-term on-screen partnership, any later developments involving that relationship tend to attract renewed attention. However, there have been no additional major criminal convictions or extended jail sentences tied to his name. But wait, there's another angle to the whole story. Brandi Pasante. Brandi Pasante was less spectacle-driven, more operational, and consistently positioned on-screen as the strategic half of a resale partnership. Based in Orange County, California, she originally appeared alongside Jarrod Sheets as co-owner of a second-hand store and as a bidder in storage auctions. As the show developed, Brandi's role shifted from supporting counterpart to independent operator. This transition was not immediate on-screen, but gradual in public life, as her relationship with Sheets deteriorated off-camera. By the late 2010s, reports confirm that the long-term partnership, both personal and business, had ended. The breakup removed one of the show's core dual-character structures. The post-separation phase marks a notable repositioning. Brandi Pasante continues to appear in storage auction-related content and reality television appearances, but her role becomes more individualized. Instead of being framed through relational tension or joint bidding decisions, she is increasingly presented as an independent business figure with her own judgment in valuation and purchasing decisions. This shift also aligns with her broader public image, moving away from relationship-centered storytelling toward individual credibility within the resale and auction space. Across her public record, there are no major criminal charges or confirmed convictions tied to Brandi Pasante. Her visibility in the media is largely professional rather than legal or controversy-driven. Unlike several figures associated with storage wars who became involved in lawsuits or arrest-related reporting, her name does not appear in verified criminal proceedings. Instead, her public footprint remains anchored in television appearances, resale business activity, and occasional media interviews. However, her name does surface in connection with a domestic dispute. We already covered that bit. A narrow escape for her. Moving on. Ivy Calvin. Ivy Calvin entered the ecosystem of storage wars as an established operator rather than a personality shaped through on-screen escalation. Based in Palmdale, California, he already ran Grandma's Attic, a thrift and consignment business functioning as both a retail outlet and a liquidation hub before joining the series, giving him a pre-existing commercial structure rather than a television-dependent identity. When he appeared in the mid to late seasons, his auction behavior was defined by disciplined valuation rather than spectacle bidding. He evaluated storage units as resale inventory, used selective engagement at auctions, and increased bids only when resale potential aligned with clear margins, contrasting sharply with higher volatility buyers in the franchise and positioning him as a calculation-driven participant in an otherwise unpredictable environment. His association with Palmdale became central to his on-screen identity, earning him the informal label King of Palmdale. Much of his acquired inventory flowed directly into his physical store operations, integrating television exposure into an already functioning business system instead of creating a new media-dependent income structure. As the series moved beyond its peak cultural phase, Calvin expanded into broader resale and asset-based ventures, including secondary resale channels and reported real estate-related activity. Unlike some cast members who exited the auction circuit due to legal disputes, health issues, or reduced visibility, Calvin maintained continuous engagement in resale operations tied to real-world business activity rather than filming schedules. But then rumors involving Ivy Calvin began circulating. So was he involved in some legal trouble? Well, as it turns out, no. The rumors were just rumors. The spread of these rumors intensified as short-form content platforms amplified recycled clips and list-based storytelling. Because many viewers encountered fragmented content rather than full context, the repeated appearance of Calvin's name in these videos created confusion. In reality, no police reports, court records, or credible entertainment news sources ever supported claims of his arrest, imprisonment, or death. The claims were effectively a byproduct of content aggregation. But there was something real, too. Following the death of Darrell Sheets, wars, renewed attention turned toward long-standing cast relationships and behind-the-scenes tensions, including commentary tied to Ivy Calvin. According to reporting and statements referenced in entertainment coverage, fellow cast member Darrell Nezhoda spoke about Sheets' struggles with online harassment prior to his death, framing it as part of a broader pattern of cyberbullying faced by reality TV personalities. Within that discussion, references to rivalries on storage wars resurfaced, including competitive dynamics involving Ivy Calvin. Naturally, he received negative attention for this. Of course, this is not to say that Calvin was guilty in any real sense, but the timing was just hard to dismiss. Dan and Laura Dotson. Dan and Laura Dotson operated within storage wars not as bidders or narrative-driven participants, but as licensed auctioneers who controlled the structural mechanics of every sale before competitive bidding began. Based in Riverside, California, they ran American Auctioneers, a registered auction firm established years before the show's production, conducting estate sales, storage lien auctions, business liquidations, and surplus property dispersals across Southern California. Their professional model predated television exposure, and continued to function as an independent commercial operation throughout and beyond the series' broadcast lifecycle. On screen, Dan Dotson's auctioneering style functioned as a pacing mechanism for the entire franchise. His chant, characterized by rapid numeric compression, rhythmic cadence, and controlled escalation, served a technical purpose in live auction environments, reducing decision latency among bidders while increasing competitive pressure through tempo acceleration. The bid call structure he used followed standard auctioneering practice, but was amplified for television by tighter editing. Laura Dotson operated in parallel as co-auctioneer and ring coordinator, managing bidder registration, item staging, reserve confirmations, and compliance with auction protocol. Together, they formed a dual operator system in which Dan executed call cadence and Laura maintained transactional flow, bidder communication, and logistical verification. Unlike buyers such as Darrell Sheets or Dave Hester, whose strategies centered on valuation speculation and resale margins, the Dotsons functioned as procedural facilitators. Their role positioned them outside the competitive risk loop. They did not acquire inventory, assume loss exposure, or engage in post-auction resale. Instead, they enforced auction mechanics, lot sequencing, bid increments, hammer finalization, and settlement documentation, ensuring legal and commercial validity of each transaction under California auction law frameworks. Things were good, great even. But then, tragedy struck in 2020, when their son, Jarrod Dotson, was involved in a shooting incident in Riverside, California. Officers responded to a reported assault involving gunfire, and Jarrod sustained a gunshot wound during the confrontation. He survived after emergency medical intervention and hospitalization. The incident was covered in regional news outlets and entertainment media due to the Dotsons' association with storage wars, although authorities confirmed it was unrelated to auction activity or the television production environment. Despite the severity of the incident, there were no verified criminal charges, civil proceedings, or legal actions involving Dan or Laura Dotson connected to the event or to their professional operations. American Auctioneers continued functioning as a full-service auction firm, executing storage lien auctions under California statutory requirements, estate liquidation contracts, and commercial asset dispersals. The business operated independently of filming schedules, often conducting auctions that were not associated with television production. This separation between broadcast representation and operational infrastructure reinforced their classification as industry professionals rather than reality television personalities. Beyond the show, Dan and Laura Dotson maintained active participation in auction conventions, industry seminars, and live event appearances tied to professional auctioneering associations. Dan Dotson also continued to serve as a public-facing figure in auction education, discussing bid mechanics, auction law compliance, and pacing strategies used in live competitive environments. Laura Dotson remained involved in operational management and bidder coordination systems. But wait, there's more! Controversies surrounding storage wars. As discussed earlier, storage wars became controversial almost as quickly as it became successful. The biggest dispute centered on allegations that parts of the show were manipulated for television. In 2012, original cast member Dave Hester filed a lawsuit against A&E and Original Productions, claiming producers salted lockers with valuable items, staged discoveries, and sometimes used pre-appraised goods to create more dramatic reveals. He also alleged certain bidders received financial assistance during auctions, raising questions about whether bidding outcomes were fully organic. Hester described the series as a staged fraud on the public, while producers denied wrongdoing, arguing that editing and production structuring were standard practices in reality television. The legal fight continued through 2013, with some claims dismissed and others moving forward before the dispute was eventually settled without a full public courtroom resolution. Hester later returned to the show. Critics also focused on how storage wars presented value itself. Former participants and industry observers argued that the show's editing structure could dramatically distort how discoveries actually unfolded. In several interviews following his 2012 lawsuit, Dave Hester alleged that production teams sometimes already knew what was inside certain lockers before bidding even began. allowing producers to steer storylines toward profitable reveals. This also meant that reactions shown on screen were not always the first genuine discovery moments viewers believed they were watching. The show allegedly compressed, rearranged, or enhanced events to maximize dramatic payoff. One recurring accusation involved the use of ringer units, or storage lockers believed to contain unusually high-value items selected specifically because they would produce cinematic reveals and stronger ratings. Producers denied outright fabrication, but acknowledged that television naturally emphasized entertaining units over ordinary ones. That explanation, however, intensified skepticism, because longtime storage buyers noted that most real auctions produced low-margin inventory, such as used furniture, damaged appliances, expired paperwork, or unsellable junk. Hidden safes and six-figure collectibles are mostly impossible to get. The controversy deepened when auction professionals began analyzing inconsistencies in appraisal scenes. Some experts featured on the show appeared to provide highly precise valuations within minutes, despite authentic antiques and collectibles often requiring extensive authentication, provenance research, serial number verification, or restoration analysis. Critics argued that this speed suggested at least partial pre-production coordination. Storage auction veterans also pointed out that many supposed jackpot finds would realistically require auction fees, transportation costs, taxes, restoration expenses, and buyer negotiations that the show rarely detailed in full. A locker presented as producing a $25,000 profit on screen might, in reality, generate far less after operational costs. This led to accusations that the series created an inflated perception of the storage auction industry, encouraging inexperienced bidders to enter auctions, believing massive discoveries were common. Following the show's popularity boom after 2010, real-world storage auction attendance surged across parts of California, Nevada, Arizona, and Texas, with veteran buyers publicly complaining that television exposure had flooded the industry with inexperienced speculators who drove bid prices upward while misunderstanding actual profit margins. Questions about labor dynamics and caste treatment created another layer of controversy behind the scenes. Multiple entertainment reports suggested cast members operated under increasingly restrictive production agreements as the show became a major ratings success for A&E. Some buyers became frustrated over uneven screen exposure, storyline prioritization, and selective editing that amplified certain personalities while minimizing others. Dave Hester's lawsuit alleged producers manipulated auction sequences and financially compensated weaker bidders to maintain competitive balance on camera. Although those claims were disputed, they fueled speculation that production staff actively shaped auction dynamics rather than simply documenting them. Other cast members hinted producers encouraged confrontation, rivalries, and emotional escalation because conflict translated into stronger television narratives. Competitive personalities like Hester and Darrell Sheets became central to this structure. Loud disagreements and aggressive bidding wars produced memorable scenes that could anchor entire episodes. Reports also circulated that filming schedules altered auction behavior. Television production required repeated camera angles, reaction shots, interviews, and staged transitions. Critics argued this transformed a normally fast-moving liquidation environment into something closer to a controlled set. Some professional buyers claimed television crews disrupted operations and inflated competition, while others accused the production of selectively choosing facilities likely to generate unusual finds rather than documenting ordinary auction ecosystems. As storage wars expanded internationally and inspired spin-offs in Canada, the United Kingdom, and other markets, audience skepticism intensified. Viewers increasingly compared the franchise to earlier reality TV controversies involving shows later accused of scripting or producer interference. More recently, the phrase reality TV itself became part of the debate, with critics arguing that storage wars functioned less as documentary observation and more as structured entertainment, using real auction settings as a backdrop. Even so, the controversy rarely damaged ratings significantly. In many ways, the accusations became part of the show's mythology. Viewers continued watching not necessarily because they believed every reveal was authentic, but because The uncertainty itself became entertaining, an ongoing question about where reality ended and television construction began. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.